Notes, of course, appear to be a longer version of an AR. Time is definitely a factor, and so is interest. In other words, if I'm going to extend money to you, a large sum of money, and I'm going to give you a year or two or even a couple months to pay me back, there's got to be something in it for me, and I'm going to make interest off of you, ARs. Basically, notes receivable from a vocabulary standpoint is when companies grant credit in exchange for a promise. Officially, it's called a promissory note. Basically, that's a written contract specifying an amount of money and time. You'll see them used when you lend money out or when things are exceeding what would be called normal time limits, or to try to settle an AR. Like if you're not getting the AR paid off, and instead of darting it and writing it off, maybe you say, okay, we're going to turn this into a longer note where you've got a little bit more time to do it. Typically, there is some formal paperwork involved. Here you see an example of, it looks a lot like a check, but it's just like a formal contract listing the amount, which I don't know if this book talks about it a lot, but it's typically called the principal, not like Mr. Keyhole principal, but the principal loan amount. How many, or your time. Time can be expressed in days, months, or years, which we'll get into, and a certain interest rate. If you go get a loan, say from your bank to go buy a car, you now are, they're an AP and you are their AR, and sometimes they'll literally will write you a check that you can go then give that money to the car dealership. Sometimes the check is written directly to the car dealership, okay? But it's got some formality to it. As far as the note itself, we have to first figure out when is it going to mature. In other words, time. And then we're going to make a little bit of money on it. In other words, interest. You can take a look at notes that are expressed in either months, days, or not even at a third, years. Months are the number divisible by 12. So if I take a 3-month note, my time will be 3 of 12, okay? Which you know fractions, you can simplify that down to 1/4. Days, now here's a little curveball for you. We've been so far using 365 for everything, haven't we? In terms of notes, it's divisible by 360. That's just a banking financial thing. Don't ask me why, other than it's just the norm in the financial world. You go take out a 45-day note, they're going to divide it by 360 and go from there to figure out maturity dates. Years is just the number divided by 1. So in other words, a 3-year note is 3 years. As far as computing interest, you run a little simple formula. And if you've taken my basic business class, you've done this before. We talk about this in personal finance, so this is a little bit of review from other classes. You take the face value of the note. Again, it's me calling it principal. I don't know if the book ever calls it principal. Okay. And some determined interest rate. I think right now the housing market, if you'd go take out a 30-year mortgage, it's right around 4% is what you're going to pay that loan, that lender, excuse me. Of course, you'll see it in terms of a percentage, but we have to, of course, turn it into, a decimal version. Times time, whatever you figured out up here. So 3 out of 12, 45 out of 360, or 3 out of 1. And then that ends up being the dollar amount to borrow the principal. We're currently in the housing unit in my personal finance class. What's really sick, we were running the numbers. It's about a half and half split. This is the sick part. If you go buy, say, a $100,000 house, and you're going to pay for this $100,000 house over the course of 30 years, 30 over 1, you're going to spend about $100,000 towards the principal, but you're going to spend about another $100,000 in just interest. So that $100,000 house over the course of 30 years is actually going to cost you about double. Because this is how lenders make money. Yikes. There's a reason banks are made of bricks. Okay? Typically. So principal times rate times time, you'll hear me say that all, it's basically what that is. The face value of the note times whatever interest times how long. Principal times rate times time is the dollar amount that you're going to have to pay above and beyond the principal to borrow the money. You folks are heading to college soon. Do you think that's free? I hope it's going to be free if you've done a lot of work to get scholarships. Okay, but you're going to borrow a huge amount of money for college. You or your parents or both. Okay, that's not technically free money. You have to not only pay that back, but it will have interest tagged onto it. If you've not already bought a car, maybe it's going to be something that you do soon. Okay, that car is not free. You maybe bought a $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 car. I'm not sure, that's up to you and your families. But if you have that principal amount times the interest rate times the time of the loan is the amount that you're going to pay on top of that principal to have that car over those X amount of years. Can you tell the big factors to keep your interest down is a shorter loan. The shorter the loan, the less you'll pay back. A 15-year mortgage on a house versus a 30-year mortgage is not that split. It looks way different. Is this in your notes? Yes, perfect. Okay, so here they give you a couple examples. If I had to do this, here's the principal, here's the rate, here's the time, and you'd basically multiply them out. Principal times rate times time, that's all multiplied towards each other. So if we put it over here to figure out how much money we're going to pay to borrow $730 at 12% interest rate for 120 days, remember going back to what I just showed you, anytime it's months, it's divisible by 12. Anytime it's days, it's divisible by 360. Anytime it's years, it's divisible by 1. So I'd take 730 times 12%, which we know we've got to move the decimal, times 120 over 360. To borrow $730 at a 12% interest rate for 120 days is going to cost you $29.20. Okay, that's a pretty high interest rate, but it's not very long. Okay, not very long. If we switch things up, $1,000 principal at 9% interest for half a year. But notice I shouldn't have said the word year. I should have said 6 months, 6 of 12. That's going to cost you $45. The bank's not making an addition anytime soon off these two loans. That's not very much money. Well, these are kind of rare loans. Banking industries are extending millions of dollars in loans. Okay. The last one, a $2,000 note at 6% interest for 1 year, 1 of 1, is going to cost you $120. Why the big jump? You know, we've got two little ones. Why the big jump down to this? Well, a couple factors here. you're taking out more principal. It's a pretty low interest rate, but it's taken you a year to pay it off. Let's do an entry. Calhoun Company wrote a $1,000 2-month 12% promissory note to settle an open account. What do you think that means? So we are, okay, Calhoun wrote a prepare entry Wilma Company makes for the receipt of the note. Okay, so Wilma Company used to be one of our ARs, who apparently, tisk, was having issues with their AR. So we're going to turn this AR into a note receivable. We're going to give them the money. So we see notes receivable, which is an asset, go up by $1,000. This is us. This is us. We are the Calhoun Company. Wilma Company was an AR that seemed to be struggling. We didn't want to write them off. We didn't want to even horse around with hoping we'd get their money. We're going to tell, maybe they're a good customer. They must be, if we're going to give them more time. We're going to say, okay, Wilma, we're going to take your notes receipt, we're going to take your AR and turn it into an NR. So we're going to say, away goes your notes receivable, but instead we're going to turn it into a, did I say notes receivable? Away goes your AR, and we're going to turn you into a notes receivable. But Wilma, we're going to give you 2 months to pay it, and we're going to charge you interest. Because we're sick of you doing this AR bit with us and stringing us along. So we're going to give you more time, but with it comes 12% interest. Why is that? Why are those two bits not a factor? This is the setting up of the note. This is not Wilma paying the note. Are we going to see more than $1,000 from her eventually? We are. We would take, just for fun, we'd take 1,000 times 12%. Times, I see months, so I'm going to divide it by 12, and how many? 2. I don't know, what's she going to owe us after 2 months at 12%? Not a ton, because it's only 2 months. And I'm not going to, you don't have to necessarily calc that out, but I'm just saying. Here's another one. Walder Company, so that must be us, lends Higley $10,000 on June 1st. A 5-month 9% note. If Walder, so that's us, presents the note to Higley on November 1st, the maturity date, Walder would do what kind of entry? So basically on June 1st, 5 months later on November 1st, what would it look like when they pay their bill? So 10 grand times 9%. I see the word month, so I'm going to divide by 12 and plug in. So when they'd pay us, we would actually see $10,375 in our pocket because the amount of interest that they were going to owe to borrow 10 grand was $375. We see notes receivable, the asset, go down. But does 10,375 and 10,000 equal each other? No. What did we earn? What's it called? Interest revenue. Very good. We earned $375 in interest revenue on borrowing this business or person money. This should be a breath of fresh air. Is this kind of easy? Why was the other one turning an AR into an NR. The AR was not going well. Sometimes you can just give them straight cash too. How are we doing on time? Let's keep going. Oh boy, things are about to get complicated. Suppose instead that Wolder prepares financial statements on September 30th. Okay. So that means all of October on this 5-month note is the next fiscal period. Okay, I first want to, is this little illustration in your notes? Perfect. Okay, I want you to take 375 plus 75 equals, of course, our 375. You know where that 375 came from, right? You got where that came from, the $10,000 note at, I don't remember the interest rate, at 5 months. Okay, so this is 4 months plus 1 month equals our 5 out of 12 months. The problem is, wham bam, calendar change. Or in other words, the fiscal year has changed. For simplicity, let's put this at 2016 and put this at 2017. I get that the calendar wouldn't change after September 30th, but just go with it, okay? You cannot claim that $75 in 2016 because it hasn't, 17, it hasn't happened yet. So this happens to notes all the time. If it pops, if you've got a note extended that tips between 2 fiscal periods, like what's going on right here, you can't claim what hasn't technically been earned yet. 2016 is 2016. I don't care if $75 is coming to us in the next month. You got to just claim a portion of it. Now, the reason I know that this is 300 is you calculate the total and figure out how much it is per month. Okay, so what does the entry look like? Interest receivable and interest revenue of $300. Here's our calculation. Still our $10,000 note at 9%. We've only earned 4 of the 5 months, and that's what will get us to 300. We know we've received $300, which also has been more money in our pocket as far as revenue goes. We know there's 1 more month on this note, but the calendar switched and fiscal year ended, so we can't claim what hasn't happened yet. Okay, we know this little scenario. Prepare the entry that would happen once the calendar turns. Now here's where things get a little bit tricky. The previous 300 right here, we hadn't gotten our money yet. We'd earned revenue. We'd earned some of our interest, but we haven't gotten our money until November 1 when it matures. So then on November 1, we got our $10,375 in cash. We know where that number came from, you know, the principal times rate times time. You see the notes receivable go down, just like what we were doing before. This is the same scenario. They're just saying, whoa, wait a minute, what if the fiscal year ended 4 months in? How's this going to be different? We see interest receivable now go down, and I'll talk about why. And we see interest revenue of only 75 this time. If I go back here, Interest receivable. Anytime I see the word receivable, do I have that in my hands yet? No, we're going to receive the 300. Then the next year it's going to go down, and the revenue we earn in 2017 is $75 instead. Thank you. That was a lot, but we got through it. I think that might have been it. Oh. I missed it by one, just like last time.